Saturday had a smell. It came before the sun was fully up, before the radio found its station, before anyone had said a single word to anyone else. It was the smell of the stove waking up, the low blue flame catching under a cast iron pot, and something else underneath it. Something that wasn't food, something older than breakfast, older than the house itself, that lived in the back of the pantry in jars with no labels, and came out only on Saturdays. In black kitchens across America in the 1950s, Saturday was not just a day off. Saturday was the day the kitchen became something else entirely. The same hands that had cooked 5 days of meals, that had seasoned iron skillets and rolled biscuit dough and stirred pots of greens from 6 in the morning, those same hands turned on Saturday to a different kind of work, the kind that didn't have a name you could print on a package. The kind that had been passed from grandmother to mother to daughter in whispers and demonstrations, in "watch me do this," and "now you try," in a language made entirely of touch and smell and result. The beauty industry would like you to believe that black women in the 1950s were underserved, that they were waiting for the right product, the right formula, the right bottle to arrive and solve the problem. That is a lie so complete, it almost becomes invisible. They were not waiting for anything. They had everything they needed, and most of it was already in the kitchen. What happened next, what the industry spent the next 30 years doing, was not invention. It was replacement. And the first thing they had to do, before they could sell anything, was make those women forget what they already knew. This is what they knew. I'm Viola, and what I'm about to share with you today, your grandmother did this, your great-grandmother did this, every black woman on their street did this every Saturday, without fail, without a receipt, without a beauty consultant telling her what she needed. If this is your first time on this channel, do me a favor right now and hit that subscribe button, because every single week we come here and we dig up what was buried. We bring back what was taken. We remember what somebody decided we should forget. Hit subscribe, ring that bell, and let's go back to Saturday morning, back to Big Mama's kitchen, because that is exactly where this begins. Number 1, the hot oil treatment that started on the stove, not in a bottle. Before there was a hot oil treatment with a brand name on it, before there was a plastic cap and a foil packet, and a set of instructions printed in 3 languages, there was a pot on the stove on Saturday morning. A small pot, sometimes the same one that had made grits 4 hours earlier, rinsed clean, sitting over the lowest possible flame, and in that pot, castor oil. Not a castor oil blend, not a castor oil-infused formula. Castor oil, the same bottle that sat in the cabinet next to the Epsom salt and the camphor, the one that had 17 uses and beauty was just one of them. Big Mama didn't measure. She poured by eye and by memory, and she knew the temperature not by a thermometer, but by the way the oil moved when she tilted the pot. Too thick, and it needed more heat. Too thin, and she pulled it back. She'd been doing this since her own mother showed her, and her mother's mother before that. There was no guessing involved. There was knowledge. She'd work it through the hair in sections, 4 sections, always 4, because that was how much hair could be handled with full attention, from the scalp out to the ends. The ends got extra, because the ends were the oldest part of the hair, the part that had been working the longest and needed the most restoration. She'd known this before any cosmetic scientist published a paper on it. In 2003, researchers at the International Journal of Cosmetic Science confirmed that pre-wash oil treatments significantly reduce protein loss in hair during washing. They presented this as a discovery. Every black woman in 1952 with a pot of castor oil and a Saturday morning already knew. The industry replaced this with a product. The product cost money. The knowledge was free. This is always how it works. Number 2. The egg wash for strength that nobody wrote down. There was an egg involved in Saturday. Not for breakfast. The breakfast eggs came later. This egg went into a bowl, not a pan. And into the bowl with it went a small amount of olive oil, sometimes a pour of apple cider vinegar, sometimes neither. Just the egg, beaten until it was smooth and pale and slightly frothy. This went on dry hair before washing. Sometimes with a warm towel wrapped around it, the kind of wrap that came from soaking the towel in hot water and wringing it by hand. Sometimes just applied and left. But it went on. The women who did this could not have told you that egg white contains lysozyme and avidin. They could not have told you that egg yolk is rich in lecithin, which coats the hair shaft and adds elasticity. They didn't have that vocabulary. What they had was the result: hair that after washing had weight and movement and didn't break when they combed through it. The protein treatment that the beauty industry sells now for $25 in a small bottle is built on this exact principle. Hydrolyzed protein, which is what most of those treatments contain, is designed to temporarily bond to the hair shaft and fill in damaged areas. An egg does the same thing. The egg does it for free. The egg was in the refrigerator already. The industry didn't discover protein treatment. They discovered that if they could get women to forget the egg, they could sell them a bottle. Number 3. Baking soda in the rinse water and why the scalp stayed clean. This one is almost gone. You have to be talking to a woman of a certain age, a woman who was washing hair in the 1950s or whose mother was, to hear about this. It is that far underground. When the wash water was ready, warm, not hot, because hot water opens the hair shaft too wide and strips too much, a spoonful of baking soda went in. Just 1 spoon, sometimes 2, stirred until dissolved. Then the hair was rinsed in it before the actual washing began. The purpose was the scalp, not the hair. The baking soda slightly altered the pH of the rinse water, making the scalp environment slightly alkaline. This loosened the buildup, the product residue, the hard water deposits, the accumulated oil, before any soap touched the hair. The shampoo that came after worked against a clean surface. The result was a scalp that was genuinely clean, not just lathered over. Modern scalp detox treatments, the ones with the fancy packaging and the chemical compound names on the label, are attempting to replicate this exact mechanism. They are selling pH manipulation as innovation. Big Mama called it the first rinse. She didn't charge $22 for it. Number 4. The lard or Crisco that sat next to the beeswax. Say this name in a room full of beauty professionals today and watch what happens. Lard, Crisco, shortening. The reaction you'll get is horror, and that horror is manufactured. Manufactured specifically to make you forget what your grandmother's bathroom shelf looked like. In 1950, in homes across the South and in the city apartments where Southern women had brought their knowledge north, there was often a small container of lard or Crisco on the beauty shelf. Not a lot. A small amount, mixed, usually, with beeswax and sometimes a few drops of an essential oil, whatever was available. Peppermint, if she could get it. Rosemary, if she had it growing. Sometimes nothing added at all. This mixture was used as a sealant. It went on last, on top of the oil treatment, on top of whatever had been worked into the hair, and it sealed everything in. It was what we now call a moisture sealant, though that phrase didn't exist yet. The concept is the same. Oil moisturizes, but without a sealant, the moisture evaporates. You need something to hold it in. Shea butter does this. Castor oil does this. Heavy pomades do this. Lard did this. All of them work on the same principle. All of them sit in the same position in the sequence. The only difference is what the beauty industry decided it was profitable to sell. What was unprofitable was the Crisco. Because Crisco was already in the kitchen. You couldn't build a brand on Crisco. So you replaced it with a jar that had a label and a scent and a promise, and you made the woman feel that what her grandmother had used was somehow inferior. It wasn't inferior, it worked. That was the problem. Number 5. The apple cider vinegar rinse for shine. This is the one your grandmother called the vinegar rinse. And she did it every single Saturday without exception. And the shine in her hair, even as a woman in her 50s, even without a single salon visit in the past year, was the kind of shine that didn't come from product. It came from practice. After washing and before any styling, The hair was rinsed in a diluted apple cider vinegar solution. A small pour, maybe 2 tablespoons, into a basin of cool water. The cool water mattered. The cool temperature closed the hair cuticle, and the mild acidity of the vinegar smoothed the cuticle flat. When the cuticle lies flat, light reflects evenly off the hair shaft. That is the physics of shine. When the cuticle is raised, from alkaline soap residue, from hard water, from heat, light scatters, and the hair looks dull. The vinegar rinse corrected the chemistry that washing had disrupted. Every conditioning rinse, every shine serum, every glossing treatment currently on the market is attempting, with varying degrees of success, to do what cool diluted apple cider vinegar does naturally and in under 60 seconds. Now your grandmother knew this. She didn't know the word cuticle. She didn't know the term pH balance. But she knew that the hair she pulled out of the vinegar rinse caught the light differently. And she knew her mother had shown her this, and her mother's mother before that. That knowledge was worth more than anything that came in a bottle with an advertisement behind it. Number 6. The cornmeal face scrub from the pantry. Saturday was not only for hair. Saturday was the day the whole woman was attended to, from scalp to face to hands. And on many Saturday mornings, before anything else happened, there was a small bowl on the bathroom sink. In the bowl, cornmeal. Yellow, coarse. The same bag that had gone into the cornbread 3 nights earlier. Mixed with enough water to make a paste, sometimes with a pour of buttermilk, sometimes with nothing at all. It was worked in small circles across the face and the neck and the back of the hands. The exfoliation it produced was real and thorough. The coarse grain of the cornmeal removing dead skin cells without stripping the underlying layer. The buttermilk, when it was added, contributed lactic acid, the same ingredient that anchors most chemical exfoliants on the market today. Black women in the 1950s were doing glycolic-adjacent exfoliation with a bowl of cornmeal and a pour of buttermilk. They called it washing their face. The beauty industry calls it a chemical exfoliant and charges $80 for a quarter-ounce bottle. Now, before we keep going, I need to pause right here, family, because I know somebody watching this right now has a memory. Not a general memory, a specific one. A specific Saturday morning in a specific kitchen with a specific woman who taught you something that nobody has ever been able to fully explain, but you carry it with you anyway. I want to know about that woman. Drop a comment right now. Tell me. What did the woman who raised you put in her hair or on her skin on Saturday morning that nobody does anymore? Tell me her name. Give her flowers right here in the comments because she deserves them. And I guarantee there is somebody else watching this right now who grew up in a different house, in a different city, maybe a different decade. And she is reading your comment and saying, "That's exactly what my big mama did too." Drop her name. Drop the ritual. We're honoring them right here. Number 7. The raw honey mask that never left the kitchen. Honey was not a specialty item. Honey was on the table. It was in the biscuits. It was in the tea. It was in the remedy for a child's sore throat at 2 a.m. Honey was already there. And on Saturday morning, some of it was redirected. A small amount, warmed slightly by sitting in a bowl of hot water for a few minutes, never put directly on a flame, was worked across the face and left for 10 to 20 minutes. Sometimes it was mixed with a pinch of turmeric. Sometimes with the oil from a piece of lemon. Often it was just honey, alone, doing what honey does. What honey does is significant and well documented now, though it needed no documentation to work. Raw honey is naturally antimicrobial. It contains hydrogen peroxide at low levels and has a pH too acidic for most bacteria to survive. It is hygroscopic, meaning it draws moisture from the air and holds it against the skin. It contains enzymes, amino acids, and trace minerals that support cell renewal. What all of that translates to, in practice, is this: a face that, after the honey came off and was rinsed clean with cool water, looked rested and bright and smooth in a way that was difficult to explain to someone who hadn't grown up watching it happen. The industry eventually noticed. Honey is now in every category of skincare: cleansers, masks, serums, moisturizers. It is sold back to you at a significant markup in a formula that is mostly water and preservatives, with honey listed fifth on the ingredient label. Big Mama's version was 100% honey, warmed in a bowl, applied by hand, rinsed with cool water. It cost what the jar of honey cost, which was shared across every other use honey had in that household. Number 8. Vaseline is the last layer, and what that actually meant. You already know about Vaseline. It was on every shelf. Every bathroom in every black home in 1950s America had a jar of Vaseline. The blue and white jar, the lid always slightly sticky, the inside always slightly excavated by a finger that had gone in too many times. But the way Vaseline was used, that part is misunderstood. Vaseline was never a moisturizer. This is crucial. Petroleum jelly does not add moisture to the skin. It cannot. Its molecules are too large to penetrate the skin barrier. What petroleum jelly does, and what it does remarkably well, is create a seal over the surface of the skin that prevents the moisture already inside the skin from leaving. Big Mama knew this, not in those words, but she knew that Vaseline went on last, not first. First came the water, a warm, damp cloth held against the face. While the skin was still slightly damp before the water fully evaporated, the Vaseline went on. A very thin layer, worked in with the fingertips, over the damp skin. The result was that the water was locked in. The moisture from the cloth became the moisture in the skin, sealed there by the petroleum jelly. In skincare today, this is called occlusive layering. In dermatology, it's called the wet wrapping method for dry skin conditions. In Big Mama's bathroom in 1953, it was called putting on your Vaseline before bed. The women who did this, who had done it their entire lives, who had learned it from their mothers, had skin in their 60s and 70s that looked decades younger than their peers who had switched to the creams and the lotions the industry had started selling. Not because they were lucky, because they were consistent, because they understood, without a single clinical trial, what moisture retention actually required. Number 9. The rosemary that grew in the yard and ended up in the hair. Not every ingredient came from a package. Some of it came from outside. In many homes, particularly in the South and in the homes of Southern-raised women who had brought the habit north, there was rosemary growing somewhere near the house. In a pot on the back step. In a strip of yard that might generously be called a garden. Growing against a fence in a patch of dirt that caught the right amount of sun. On Saturday, a handful of rosemary went into the pot of boiling water. It steeped. 10 minutes, sometimes 20, until the water had turned a pale gold and the whole kitchen smelled like something green and clarifying. Then the water was strained and allowed to cool, and when it was warm but not hot, it was used as a final rinse, poured slowly over the hair after washing and not rinsed out. Rosemary water as a hair treatment is having what the beauty industry calls a moment right now, as if this is a new discovery, something that emerged from a laboratory or a trend cycle. It is not new. There is a study from 2015 published in the journal SkinMed that found rosemary oil to be as effective as minoxidil in promoting hair growth after 6 months of use. 6 months. The researchers were surprised. Black grandmothers who had been doing a version of this since before any of those researchers were born were not surprised at all. The rosemary rinse increased scalp circulation. It had mild antimicrobial properties that kept the scalp environment clean and balanced. The compounds in rosemary, rosmarinic acid, ursolic acid, carnosic acid, are now being studied by the hair growth industry with the kind of intensity they would have applied decades earlier if the women using rosemary rinses in 1950 had been a demographic the industry cared about. They didn't care then. The industry cares now because they found a way to bottle it and put a price on it. The rosemary didn't change. The price tag did. Number 10. The way the press worked and the knowledge behind the hands. In the 1950s, most black women who pressed their hair did not go to a salon for it. They did it at home, on Saturday, with a pressing comb that had been heated on the stove and a care and skill that took years to develop. And around that pressing, before and after, in everything that surrounded the heat, was a system of protection that was so complete and so intelligent that it staggers anyone who looks at it closely. Before the heat came, the oil, light oil, worked through the hair first. Not heavy, not thick. The oil served two purposes. It conducted the heat evenly, preventing hot spots that could scorch, and it helped the hair move under the pressing comb rather than resist it. This reduced breakage from the mechanical force of the press. The pressing comb itself was tested, always, on a scrap of brown paper bag before it ever touched hair. If the paper scorched brown, the comb was too hot. If it did nothing, not hot enough. If it left a faint mark the color of weak tea, the comb was ready. This was a temperature calibration system that predated any heat tool with a temperature setting by decades. After the press, the hair was wrapped or tied, protected from the humidity, kept in alignment by structure rather than allowed to contract randomly. The pressing oil had done its work, the wrapping preserved the result, and by Sunday morning the hair had a smoothness and a body that lasted through the week. The beauty industry looked at this system and saw a market. They created pressing oil in a bottle, the same oil, branded. They created pressing combs with temperature settings, the same function, electrified. They created heat protectant spray, the same protection, in aerosol form. Each product solved a piece of what the home pressing ritual had already solved with a comb, a flame, and a woman who knew exactly what she was doing with both. Number 11. The rendered beef tallow that some homes still kept. This one is almost impossible to find now. Not the ingredient, tallow, which is rendered beef fat, is experiencing a revival in certain corners of the internet, rediscovered as if it arrived from nowhere. But the practice, the specific practice of keeping a small amount of rendered tallow in a tin for skin use, this has almost entirely disappeared from living memory. In the 1950s, particularly in rural homes and in homes with southern roots, there was sometimes a tin of rendered tallow kept separately from the cooking fat. It smelled different from lard, heavier, more animal, earthier, and it went on the skin, not into a pan. The face wasn't usually the destination. This was for the rough places, the elbows, the knees, the heels, the back of the hands that had been in dishwater and cold air and hard work. Applied at night, covered sometimes with cotton socks or cotton gloves to hold it in while sleeping, it did what nothing else quite replicated. It repaired skin that had been broken down by physical labor and cold weather. Tallow's fatty acid profile is nearly identical to the sebum the human skin produces naturally. Its similarity to the skin's own oils allows it to absorb at a level that vegetable-based oils cannot fully match. The body recognizes it. It doesn't just sit on top. This is what the women who used it knew from experience. It worked differently than anything else they had tried. And they had tried everything, because before the beauty counter arrived in their part of the world, they were working with what they had and testing everything by result. Number 12. The oatmeal bath that happened in the big basin. Not everyone had a bathtub. In many homes in the 1950s, in the South, in the city apartments where plumbing was old and inadequate, the Saturday bath happened in a large basin or a galvanized tub, heated water poured in from the stove, and into that water sometimes went oatmeal. Not a fancy colloidal oatmeal product, not a dermatologist-recommended formula. Oatmeal from the canister, the same oatmeal from breakfast, tied into a square of muslin or old cotton cloth so it wouldn't go loose in the water, dropped in and allowed to steep. The water turned a pale, silky white. The cloth could be used as a gentle scrub against the skin. The women who did this weren't treating a medical condition. They were maintaining skin that had been exposed to cold and dry air and lye soap and hard work, and they had learned, through use and through what they'd been told, that the oatmeal water left the skin feeling different than plain water did. Softer, less taut, less likely to be itchy through the week. The compound responsible for this is called avenanthramide. It is found only in oats, and it has significant anti-inflammatory and anti-itch properties. The FDA in 1989 recognized colloidal oatmeal as a safe and effective skin protectant. Aveeno built an entire product line on this recognition and became one of the most successful skincare brands in American history. The woman with the muslin bag of oatmeal in her Saturday bathwater in 1952 was doing the same thing. She was doing it before Aveeno existed. She was doing it without knowing the word avenanthromide. She was doing it because her mother had shown her, and her mother's skin had told her everything she needed to know. Number 13. The final rinse with cool water and why it closed everything. Every ritual, no matter how elaborate or how simple, ended the same way. Cool water, the coolest that could be tolerated. Over the face, over the hair, over the skin. It was the last thing that happened, every time, without exception. This was not comfort. This was not preference. This was knowledge applied consistently over generations of observation. Cold water causes the blood vessels near the surface of the skin to constrict. This reduces puffiness, tightens the appearance of pores, and gives the skin a temporary tautness and luminosity that warm water does not. For hair, cold water flattens the cuticle. The same principle as the apple cider vinegar rinse, this time using temperature rather than chemistry. The final cool rinse was the closing of everything that Saturday had opened and treated and worked on. Every treatment that had gone before it was sealed in or resolved by this final act. The hair that came out of the cool rinse was smooth, lightly shining, cuticle flat, oil-treated and protected. The skin that came out of the cool rinse was closed, toned, the natural barrier intact. Cryofacials at upscale dermatology spas charge several $100s for a controlled cold treatment that achieves a similar vascular response. The women in those kitchens in 1950 got it at the end of a Saturday bath, for free, every week without fail. The cold water was always there. The knowledge that it should be last. That was the piece that was passed down. There was a time, and I need you to sit with this for a moment before we close, when Black women in this country did not have access to the beauty counter, to the salon, to the department store shelves. When the beauty industry that was building itself in the 1950s was not building itself for them. When the products being advertised in magazines they weren't supposed to be reading were being sold in stores they weren't always welcome to enter. And in that time, they were not waiting. They were in their kitchens. On Saturday morning, before the rest of the house was fully awake, with a pot on the stove and a jar of castor oil and an egg from the refrigerator and a pour of apple cider vinegar and a handful of rosemary they'd cut from the yard, they were in there doing something. Not making do. Not improvising with what they had because they couldn't afford better. They were executing a system of care that they had inherited and tested and refined over generations, and the results spoke for themselves. Their hair, their skin, their hands. These were the documentation. These were the proof. What the beauty industry did, beginning in the late 1950s and accelerating through the 1960s and 1970s, was not bring Black women into a world they hadn't had access to. It was replace a world they had already built. It sold back to them, at a price, a version of what they already knew. A version that was less complete, less suited to them, more profitable for the people selling it. The kitchen didn't disappear because something better arrived. The kitchen disappeared because something was being sold. And what this channel exists to do, what we do together, every single week, is go back into that kitchen. Open those jars with no labels. Remember the temperature of the water and the smell of the oil, and the names of the women who knew all of this before any of us were born. Because it did not disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because someone decided it was more profitable for us to forget. We remember. We bring it back. And the next time you reach for a jar with an ingredient list on the back, I want you to think about what was already in your grandmother's kitchen, and whether what you're paying for is something new or something old that was taken from you and repackaged without acknowledgement. That knowledge belongs to you. It always did. I'll see you next time, family.